Sorry in advance if you hear my cat. She's making biscuits behind me on her bed, and she's a force that cannot be stopped. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to do episode 2 of my 26 books I would like to read in 2026. The 3 that I ended up reading this month were The Poppy Fields by Nikki Erlich. The next one I read was The Lathe of Heaven by Ursula K. Le Guin. And the last one that I read for this episode was Where the Axe is Buried by Ray Naylor. The first book that I wanted to talk about today was The Poppy Fields. And this is about 4 strangers who are trying to get from an airport in Kansas, I believe. They are all waiting to catch their flight out to California when this big, when the tornado sirens go off and everybody has to take shelter in one of the tornado shelter areas. I think there was some stairwells, there's a bathroom, a couple other places, but everyone had to take shelter. When everyone was able to leave where they were sheltering, everyone had to get in line to reschedule their flights because all the flights had been canceled. And obviously not everyone is going to be able to get onto the other flights. And the 4 people that we follow throughout the book were not able to get on a flight. So then they decided to try to rent a car. And these people do not know each other. So these are the book is telling you different chapters in each person's perspective. So we're kind of all getting their perspective of how this tornado warning has affected their plans to travel west. Let me introduce you to our characters. We have Ava, who is an artist who is bringing along her dog, PJ. We have Sasha, who is an occupational therapist, and she has just had a really devastating loss in her life, and so she is heading out to California to petition their rejection of her application to go to the poppy fields. Ray is a firefighter, and he has had something happen to his brother after his brother went to the poppy fields, and so he is trying to go find out what exactly happened to his brother while he was at the poppy fields. The 4th person is Sky, and she is this very free-spirited teenager, and she doesn't start off her journey with them. She actually starts off hitching a ride with this family and their teenage daughter who are heading west, which she doesn't really care what her destination is. She just wants to go on an adventure, is what we're told. All 4 of them are waiting in line for rental cars. Obviously, Sky's not able to rent one because she's not young enough, which is why she ends up hitchhiking with another family. One of the strangers, Ray, is able to get one of the last rental cars in the lot, and it's this bright yellow car. Sasha convinces Ray to let them ride together, and Ava says she would pay for the gas if Sasha and Ray took turns driving because Ava doesn't have a driver's license. Ray reluctantly agrees. He's not super comfortable with it, but he also understands that desperation to go to the poppy fields, and so he kind of, against his better judgment, decides to let them ride with him. Every few chapters, we also get snippets from the director of the poppy fields, and we kind of see what she is currently going through. And she is the scientist who helped develop this method of what the poppy field represents in the first place. Oh, that's right. You probably want to know what on earth the poppy fields even are. Let's get into it. The poppy fields is this remote scientific research center that is in the deserts of California. After they're screened, because you have to be screened to know if you'd be a good candidate for the poppy fields in the first place, they are able to sleep away their grief and or some sort of devastating loss. That can be the loss of a child, a parent, a sibling, a friend, witnessing something horrific, and you need time for your body to make that pain a little less, a little dulled. Not all people are eligible to go to the poppy fields, and it's not a money thing necessarily. It is more of a whether you are genetically compatible with the science. And we don't ever find out what specifically the science is or how they figured it out. It's kind of just something that is taken at face value, and you kind of have to accept it and move on, which is fine. The poppy fields are free, but I said it's not based on money, kind of, because the people who go also have to be able to afford to take 4 to 8 weeks off of life, essentially, because that's how long you could end up staying in the poppy fields. So you do have to have some level of financial security so that your life back home doesn't fall apart while you're gone, if that makes sense. So they don't charge you for it, but there is still that level of not this certainly is not for everyone, because if you worked paycheck to paycheck, if you were a single parent, this is not something you would viably be able to do. But they're trying to make it as accessible as possible. And the rest of the book is about their trip out to the poppy fields. I did not realize that most of this book was going to end up being their drive out there. Like, it talks about it, but I thought we would get more time at the poppy fields at the end. We didn't end up spending a lot of time there. We spent a couple days there and then we were done. I don't mind a road trip story, but I know that there are a lot of people that do mind it. So just know that going in, that it is a lot of, I would say 80% of the book is their time on the road and their experiences with things that occur while they're on the road. The book also weaves how these 4 strangers and even the director end up being connected in some way, shape, or form. And I thought that Nikki Ehrlich did a really good job of weaving their stories together. And it wasn't something that I guessed right away for any of them. So that was nice. There are parts of this book that you would say to yourself, like, this would never happen in real life. So you do have to suspend your disbelief a little bit, but I don't think you have to suspend your disbelief and then it takes anything away from the story at the end of the day. I do think it's really cool. There was a point in the book where there was almost a little nod to her other book called The Measure, and that's where everyone one day is delivered this box and inside of it has a string, and whether it's short or long, it depends on how long you're going to live for. And in this book, they talk about the strings that the fates have, in Greek mythology. And so I thought that was really cool that we almost got to see where maybe perhaps some inspiration for the measure came from the Greek myths, where the fates would cut your strings, and depending on how long your strings were is how long the fates determined you would live for. And so I thought that was really cool. Overall, I gave this book a 4.25. I really enjoyed it. I had a good time reading it. Like I said, I don't mind a road trip story. It might bother some people, but I think there was enough plot in between the drive times that it doesn't feel like they're just constantly on the road talking about life. There are kind of at every stop things that happen that add to the story, I think. I did really enjoy the book. I really enjoyed the story. I enjoyed the characters that were in the story. I thought they were really likable. I really enjoyed seeing how over the course of just a few days, like all 4 of them, plus the director, so I guess all 5 of them, how their lives were forever changed by this trip. I think it's really neat that if fate, as it were, hadn't intervened and, they didn't have to shelter in place during the tornado warning, then they wouldn't have had this impactful, meaningful weekend. And maybe the outcome of all of their stories would have been completely different, because the road trip, the slowness of it, gave them time to ponder each of their motives for going to the poppy fields in the first place and what they were looking to get out of it at the end of the day. And I thought that was really cool. So that is The Poppy Fields by Nikki Ehrlich. I recommend that you give it a read at some point. The next book that I wanted to talk about was The Lathe of Heaven by Ursula K. Le Guin. This is the first Ursula K. Le Guin book that I have finished. I started The Left Hand of Darkness last year, and it was a very smart science fiction book. And at that time, I did not have the mental capacity to continue reading it. So I got about a third of the way through. I would like to go back and read it at some point. But I did get through The Lathe of Heaven, and I have lots of thoughts about it. This was a really fascinating read to me. In like the broadest of strokes, there is this man named Orr. This is his last name, so I'm just going to call him Orr because last name, first name, Lola. There's our main character, Orr, who believes that when he dreams, sometimes his dreams change reality. And it's not every dream that he has. It's called affective dreaming. We meet Orr when he has been caught with someone else's prescription meds. They kind of live in a world. It's hard to describe because, again, the world is so ever changing as we read the story. But Orr lives in a world that is very heavily regulated by the government down to your prescriptions. And he is caught with someone else's prescription because he is trying to make himself not dream. He doesn't want to dream. He needs to be able to sleep, but he doesn't want to dream because he doesn't want to affect reality. He thinks that's too big of a power and he does not want that. And he knows that the few times that he's had effective dreams in the past, it has been drastically large changes, and he doesn't want to do that. He does not want that kind of power. He's a really like solid, down to earth sort of fellow. As part of his, I don't want to say sentencing, but as part of the agreement that he has to not go to jail, he has to go to see a psychologist. Yes. He has to go see a psychologist, and that is where we meet Dr. Haber. And Dr. Haber is the man who is going to supposedly help or stop having all of these effective dreaming and be able to just live a normal life. And unfortunately, Dr. Haber gets a taste of what effective dreaming does, and it corrupts him, and he uses Orr for the rest of the book to try to have personal gain to make a world that he feels is the best world and the most perfect world. And I think we see throughout the book that no matter how you can word things or how much good intention may be in there, that we as humans, we're too small to affect the entire world, and good intentions aren't always good enough to make the world what we need it to be. Dr. Haber starts out not believing Orr, kind of as thinking he's a little bit, maybe he's having a little psychological break. And so he's like, okay, well, let me hypnotize you. A lot of his therapy is done through hypnosis. He basically will hypnotize Orr, make him fall asleep. And before he does fall asleep, he kind of can give him suggestions on the kind of dreams that he should have. He generally waits a few minutes. He has this machine called the augmenter, and it kind of can track brain patterns as it goes through the different stages of sleep. And based on his augmenter, he can see when he hits that D sleep, which is the dream sleep, that will allow him to potentially effectively dream. And he'll wait a few minutes, and then he'll snap him out of the hypnosis to wake him up. The first instance we as the reader have of seeing whether Orr is telling the truth or not is when he wakes up from his first dream, and we see that the mural behind the doctor's desk has changed. It used to be at the landscape of the city because Dr. Orr didn't have a window in his office, and so he had this big like mural of the city so that he could have what he would hoped would be like an image of the city, you know, if he had a window. And when Orr wakes up from his dream, it is changed into a horse. It's a picture of a horse. Dr. Haber acts like he doesn't believe him. He's like, no, that's always been a horse. I don't know what you're talking about. And we as the reader, the longer the book goes on, we aren't sure whether Haber actually believes him either, which I thought was a really interesting kind of way to bring about the story, because we're like, does he actually believe him, or is he just feeding into this delusion? We see in Haber's mind, but we can't decipher based on his narcissistic ramblings whether he actually believes that Orr is changing reality, or whether these are things that he's actually earned in his life and these are positions he's always had. We are not privy to that particular inner thought of Haber's. We're privy to a lot of his other inner thoughts, but we are not privy to that one. Kind of wish we were. Orr does not believe that Haber is using his dreams for the better, and he does try to get someone to help him. That's where we meet the female main character. I don't want to say too much because it does kind of get crazy for a while. I really liked how she spoke about racial identity. It's really hard to talk about because it's a weirdly large plot point in the book about halfway through. But the way she handles it and the way she seems to understand how having your own racial identity is so important. And when you don't have that, who are you really at the end of the day? And so I really liked her exploration of that. The person he tries to get involved is a lawyer. He wants her to stop Haber because he doesn't believe that what he's doing is ethical, and that while he is mandated to go to these sessions, so he's kind of trapped by Haber. Haber's not really trying to cure him, which is the whole point of the therapy. And so the lawyer is trying to figure out how she can help him from a legal perspective, because after the many dreaming iterations of society, Haber's made it really hard for Orr to have any legal grounds to stand on in order to get out of these therapy sessions. Because again, at the end of the day, Haber wants to keep Orr so that he can continue changing society the way he wants it. There's something more diabolical going on that we don't find out till towards the end, but that's one of the biggest reasons that it's presented to us. There is a lot of heavy themes in this book. This book, I kind of, when I was reading it, I kept comparing it in my mind to 1984. There was a lot of heavy topics that took place in this book. There's even, which was crazy to me because this was written in, I believe, 1971, right? And where is it? And even in 1971, there's predictions of the US at war with Afghanistan, which was crazy that is something she pulled out. I even said, what a weird prediction considering she wrote this in 1971. Oh, right here. Ooh, Iran is at war with Israel. Or the Iran of this future, which is combined with a couple of other countries, and the Israel of this future is also combined with a couple of other countries. But at the end of the day, Iran and Israel are at war in this book. And I was like, Miss LeGuin, if you had a crystal ball and you knew all this, man, why didn't we fix anything? But I thought that was very interesting. It does talk about war a lot. You can tell that she's not a fan of war. It was weird, I will have to say, because I read this book, and then I read this book, and during that same week, I read this book. And let me tell you, what a weirdly heavy week of reading that was, talking about, you know, government oppression and fighting fascism that week in my reading. And so that was just a little bit odd how they all just kind of came together like that, because I didn't even mean to do that. When I picked Where the Axe is Buried, I picked it because I liked Ray Naylor's book, The Tusks of Extinction. And I have two more of his books, but I had bought Where the Axe is Buried. I bought Where the Axe is Buried last year, and I wanted to get to it. And The Lathe of Heaven had a pretty cover, and I knew I wanted to read a Ursula K. Le Guin book, so I started here. And so it's just weird how they all came together that week. There's a lot to unpack in this book. There's a lot of talk about climate change and the human impact on the environment, what happens when climate change goes unchecked, and the effects long-term of that negative impact. The book takes place in Portland, but they're like in March and it's 70 degrees, and it's not just raining sometimes, like it rains every day, like every day. And I know Portland's a very like wet city, but in this book, he makes a point of saying it didn't used to be like this, and it is now. A lot had changed in the last like 15 years, I believe, of his life, that a lot of these climate issues had come to pass, which is also weird because I think across the country this year, a lot of us are hitting like record temperatures. We hit 90 plus degrees in the town that I live in. I mean, I live in West Texas and it is hot here most of the year, but you know, we were 17, 18, 19 degrees above our daily norms. We were hitting records for hottest days in March. And I know that there's been a lot of other cities this year who have been abnormally warm, and it's just frustrating to see that from 1971 to now, how little we have really learned since the 1970s when it comes to our global climate, especially with all the regulatory rollbacks that have started happening in the United States. Again, like I said, how it doesn't matter how good intentioned you are when you aren't thinking of the whole picture, when you're thinking of like, let's just be nice to each other. Or at one point, I thought this was interesting, hold on, and I didn't mark it. There's another one Okay. They're trying to make all the wars go away. Okay, I can't find the original quote, but here's an instance of good intention dreams going wrong. And he tried to be very specific. So this is the doctor. He's playing back a tape of when he had hypnotized Orr previously. I can't find where he had originally hypnotized him, but he says, I'll have to skip a bit. All right. Now his voice was on the tape again saying, peace. No more mass killing of humans by other humans. No fighting in Iran and Arabia and Israel. No more genocides in Africa. No more stockpiles of nuclear or biological weapons ready to use against other nations. No more research on ways and means of killing people. A world at peace with itself. Peace as a universal lifestyle on Earth. You will dream of a world at peace with itself. So he was very specific in humans' peace. But it still leaves room for your subconscious to add other things. And it was really interesting what was added. So this is the lawyer talking kind of this much ways through the book. She says, are there really good people without resentment, without hate? She wondered. People who never get cross-grained to the universe, who recognize evil and resist evil and yet are utterly unaffected by it? Of course there are. Countless, the living and the dead, blah, 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 paragraph. There are enough of them, enough to keep us going, perhaps. So she's talking about how she thinks that Orr is such a good man. She says that he is a man whose personal dignity went so deep as to be nearly invisible. And he had integrity, wholeness, like a block of wood not carved. He was the strongest person that she had ever known because he could not be moved away from the center. And this is why she liked him. So she is saying that Orr's character is he's so full of compassion and dignity and integrity. He knows that his dreams are affecting the world and he doesn't want that for himself. He doesn't want that power that Dr. Haber is giving him. He wants it to be gone. He doesn't want what he dreams to affect everyone else because he knows how uncontrollable dreams really are. And Haber doesn't want to listen to that. He thinks that he can control anything with his little machine because science. There is one point that I write, this is why we don't play God. But I'm afraid that if I read that to you, another plot point, there's a lot of twists and turns in the plot because you have to remember every time he dreams, there's something that changes. So I'm really trying hard not to spoil things because I was shocked by a lot of the things that happen in the book. And I highly recommend that you give it a read as well. It's a modern classic almost at this point because it's, 70 to now it's 55 years old. So it's very close, kind of like in the Handmaid's Tale realm. And it definitely has made me more excited to try more of her work. The last book that I wanted to talk about was Where the Axe is Buried by Ray Naylor. I gave this book 4 stars. I thought that there was a lot of really good points made in the book. I just felt like at times it was very slow and a little bit confusing because we get a lot of different people's perspectives, and each of the chapters, they do tell you who is the narrator. It just was hard sometimes to keep track of who everyone was, for me personally. So you have this world, some sort of distant future world where most countries are run by prime ministers, and these prime ministers are all AI. They all have an AI intelligence. So in their mind, they've taken the human error out of the equation of running a country because you have AI running it instead through these prime ministers. And then you have the Federation, which is run by a president. Sounds great, right? You have free elections, except that they have created this technology that allows the same president's mind to be downloaded over and over again into these bodies that are called blanks. And everybody in the country knows that the person that they're allowed to freely vote for is the same man that was their previous leader because he is an authoritarian president. And so we get a kind of sneak peek into how people in their federation live. Our main character, well, one of the main characters, Lilia, she is visiting the federation. She lived there as a child and left and moved to London for school. And she felt a responsibility to come back to the federation one last time to tell her dad goodbye in person. And she ends up stuck in the federation. She's not allowed to go back. She is not on house arrest, but basically on house arrest. They have all of their citizens are kind of constantly being watched. Everything is bugged. There's cameras everywhere. Everyone in the federation has a social credit score. And based on your social credit score kind of determines where you're allowed to shop, how far away you're allowed to go from like your home. And so we meet Lilia when she's in a grocery store trying to buy some groceries with the little bit of money that she has for her dad and her. And she runs into this agent, guard, man person. I don't know if he was a police officer. I don't think it's, but anyway, he runs into some sort of Federation agent and he scans her social credit score and he's like, you're out of your zone. And she's like, I was able to come to the store yesterday. And he's like, well, you're not today. And she was basically like, well, I don't understand. He's like, yeah, maybe that's the point. You don't understand. So she goes home and she's not sure why she's lost points until she realizes that she had talked to her dad the day before, because every Sunday everyone is supposed to go to church. Like you have the big, massive federal central church that everyone attends. And her dad has had a lot of pain from his time in war and his leg was hurting. And when he goes to church, a lot of times, if he doesn't take pain medication, he's in a tremendous amount of pain from standing so much. And so he said that he didn't think that he could go stand at service. And she said, basically like, that's okay, or we'll take a weekend off or something like that. But she is guessing that those words, even in the privacy of her home, were recorded, and she lost points per word she spoke, passively even supporting the fact that her father would not do what the government feels that people should do on Sunday. Basically, in the Federation, all your words, all your actions are tracked. You have an authoritarian president who is not a great guy. And we meet like we meet the doctor who is helping him because his current blank body is failing, and so they're going to need to move him to a new body soon. We meet a revolutionary who wrote this book that is illegal in the country, and we meet her like kind of towards the end of her life. And then we get flashbacks of when she was younger and what happened to her partner. We get to meet someone who works in the government with the prime minister in the Republic. And so you meet kind of the strong man for the president who kind of does things that the president doesn't want to get his hands dirty with. We meet Lilia's boyfriend from England. So there's a lot of balls in the air. And then it also felt slow at times, which was just weird. The plot is very complicated. I think it was a very ambitious book, and it just fell a little bit flat for me, is all. I just think that maybe if it were a little longer, it's not a long book. It's barely 300 pages. Yeah, it's 322 pages long, so it's not even that long. So I felt like we just needed a little bit more so that it wasn't so confusing by the end for me personally. This is definitely not a positive book. You definitely don't get like warm fuzzies reading it. There isn't an easy out for anybody in the book. You really get to see the dark side of the world. And even, in the Republic, where you have all these prime ministers and everyone thinks that they are so much better than the Federation because they have these prime ministers and all their citizens have all of these rights and stuff. You still have to remember that at the end of the day, your prime minister is still an AI. They're still a machine, and they don't do things that are always in the best interest of humans. They might do things that are in the best interest that they believe of, like the economy. And I think that as the book goes on, that becomes more and more glaringly obvious. He never offers the reader false hope. He never makes hope the thing that the reader needs to hold on to, because as long as you hope really hard, everything will turn out right in the end. That's not how the book plays out. I think Naylor did that part really well, and I really enjoyed that aspect. I liked that it's not a happily ever after. So if you're expecting that, please don't. It does show that even in terrible times and in terrible moments, that there are people who will still do the right thing. That even in the moments where you think all hope is lost, someone, hopefully, and that's the small bit of hope he gives you, you hope that someone will still do the right thing. And we do see that as the book progresses, which was really nice. It's also very timely, I feel like, to our world right now, especially with the rise of AI, and everyone is leaning into AI. And I think that in a sense, it can bring a lot of help to our world, but I think the way that it is being used is not being used in the most effective way. And, you know, we might not be too far off from something like this if we continue to let AI rule as much of our lives as some people do rely on it now. I think it's important, if you're going to read this book, that you need to read the acknowledgments. He talks about why he wrote this story. He talks about his inspiration for writing the story and how he wants the world that his daughter lives in tomorrow to be better than it is today. And I thought that was really impactful, especially considering, you know, I have 4 kids and I want my kids' world to be the best that it can be. And right now, the world that they are set to inherit is so bleak. Like I said, this book had a lot to say in it. I still gave it 4 stars. It just was a little confusing at times. I'm not 100% sure what happened to one particular character. They say what happened, but then I don't remember that happening. And so then I'm like, did I miss something? Which is entirely possible, because like I said, it was slow and fast, and it was a very complicated book. But I think that if you like books like that, I think if you like books that tackle things that are going on in our world right now very head on, and kind of give you a this is what could happen if we continue down this path kind of story, then I think this is a book for you. So today we talked about 3 more books that I read for my 26 to read in 2026. I read The Lathe of Heaven by Ursula K. Le Guin, and I gave it 4.25 stars, I believe. I think so. I also read Where the Axe is Buried by Ray Naylor, and I gave this 4 stars. And I also read The Poppy Fields by Nikki Ehrlich, and I don't think I said what I gave this, but I actually gave this one a 4.25 as well. I had a really good time reading all 3 of these books. I was really excited. They were either 4 or 4.25 stars, which is awesome. You know, you always want to read books that are good. And if you would like to see what we're going to read next month, what are we going to read next month? I looked it up. Oh no, I looked it up. We're going to be reading The Martian by Andy Weir, because that's the last one that I haven't read by him. We're going to read The Martian Chronicles by Ray Bradbury, and oh no, I don't remember at the top of my head. This is the other one that I'm going to read next month as well. So I think after April, I only have to read 2 a month to finish them by the end. So follow along and let's see if I can read these 3 books next month. Thank you for spending time with me today. I really appreciate it. I hope that you had a good time. I hope that you found a book that you would like to read, and I will see you next time. Bye. That's not right. Totally forgot what we were doing. The flights at the airport are canceled. That's right. That's what it was. Sasha convinced. This is a
2 hours later.
Oh. Oh, for the love of God. You probably heard all the dinging. Move out of my way. Thank you. Kype is done through hypnosis. Yes, hypnosis. How do I word this? Oh my gosh, I'm just gonna end up cutting all of this. And then you have, hush, and I feel like this is so disconnected.